Ethan was 10 when the colony of New Asteron still smelled of metal dust and hot engines. It was one of those small human outposts on the edge of explored space, far from the big cities and glowing towers of Earth. Life there was hard. People worked in mines, fixing machines and carrying heavy rocks just to earn enough for a single meal. Ethan's father worked long shifts in the deep tunnels, and his mother served as a medic for injured workers. Ethan spent most of his free time near the scrapyard behind the repair bay, where broken drones and old shuttles were left to rust. He liked to collect shiny things, bolts, pieces of glass, and little metal chips that caught the sunlight. One day, as he climbed over a pile of scrap, he heard a faint sound, a soft humming, almost like someone was singing. He followed the sound and found a small figure crouched beside an old service droid. It was a girl, maybe his age. Her skin was light blue with a silver tint that shone when the sun touched it. Her eyes were big and bright, almost glowing. Around her neck was a metal collar with blinking red lights. Ethan had seen collars like that before. They were worn by alien workers, Varelians, his father called them. They had lost a war with humans years ago and were now sent to colonies as laborers. The girl was trying to repair the droid. Sparks flew as she touched a wire and she winced. "Hey," Ethan said softly. "You'll hurt yourself." She turned quickly, startled. For a moment she looked scared, like she expected him to shout at her. But Ethan didn't move closer. He just smiled. "I can help. I fix these all the time." The girl studied him for a second, then slowly nodded. Ethan crouched beside her and began working on the droid. Together they fixed a few wires and adjusted the power cell. When the droid's eyes blinked green, the girl gasped in surprise. "It works," she whispered. Ethan grinned. "Told you." The girl smiled for the first time. It was a small, shy smile that made her look peaceful. "My name is Lyra," she said. "I'm Ethan." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the droid roll away. Then Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small candy cube, one of the few sweet things he had. "Here," he said. "You can have it." Lyra hesitated. "We are not allowed to take food from humans." "Then don't tell anyone," Ethan said with a wink. She giggled softly and took it. The sound of her laugh stayed in Ethan's mind for days. From that day they met often. Ethan would sneak out after school and head to the scrapyard. Lyra was always there, working on something. Old drones, metal plates, anything she could fix. She said fixing things made her feel free. Ethan brought her little gifts, a broken compass, a shiny rock, sometimes an apple from his lunch. In return, Lyra told him about her homeworld, Virella, a planet covered in crystal trees and oceans that glowed at night. Her voice always carried a quiet sadness when she spoke of it. One afternoon, as the sun set behind the mining towers, they sat together on a pile of rocks, watching the orange sky turn purple. "Ethan," Lyra said softly, "do you think humans and Varelians can ever be friends?" "Why not?" he said. "You're my friend," she smiled faintly. "But when we grow up, things will change. Humans forget. They grow older and stop caring." Ethan shook his head. "Not me." Lyra looked at him for a long time. "Promise?" "I promise." She reached out her hand. Her skin shimmered faintly in the fading light. "Then promise me one more thing," she said. "If I'm ever free, when we grow up, you'll marry me." Ethan's heart jumped. He didn't really understand what marriage meant beyond stories he'd heard, but he nodded. "I promise," he said again. Lyra smiled, and for a moment, the collar around her neck blinked once and dimmed, as if it felt the honesty in his words. The next morning, everything changed. When Ethan went to the labor quarters, the gates were locked. Soldiers stood guard. The Varelians were gone, taken away during the night. His mother said their owner had sold them to another colony. Ethan didn't understand. "Where did they go?" he asked. "Somewhere far," his mother said softly. "You won't see them again." He ran to the scrapyard, shouting Lyra's name, but the wind carried back only dust. The place felt empty, colder somehow. On the ground near the old droid, he found a small piece of cloth, a corner of the scarf she used to wear. He picked it up and held it close. From that day, he never forgot her. Years passed. Ethan grew older. He studied mechanics and joined the Galactic Survey Corps, a group that explored uncharted worlds. Life moved forward, but every night before sleeping, he would look at the old piece of cloth tied to his wrist. It reminded him of a promise made under an orange sky. He traveled across distant stars, repairing ships, mapping planets, meeting hundreds of people, but none of them had Lyra's quiet eyes or gentle voice. 10 years later, during a deep space patrol near the border of the old Virelian zone, Ethan's ship picked up a weak distress signal. "This is transport vessel Era 91, a soft voice said through the static. "Systems failing. Requesting help." Ethan leaned forward, heart racing. The voice was faint but familiar, musical, calm, and filled with the same tone he had heard long ago in the scrapyard. He whispered to himself, "It can't be." He quickly locked the signal and turned the ship toward the source. The wreck appeared on his radar, small, damaged, spinning slowly near an asteroid field. He sent out a docking request, but there was no reply. He didn't wait. He activated manual controls and guided his ship close, matching rotation, then locked onto the airlock. The sound of metal connecting echoed through the cabin. Ethan grabbed his toolkit and put on his breathing mask. The airlock door opened with a hiss, revealing a corridor filled with smoke and flickering lights. He stepped in carefully. The walls were scorched, the floor scattered with broken tools and fallen crates. "Hello?" he called out. "Anyone alive?" There was silence for a moment, then a soft sound from deeper inside like a faint groan. He followed it, stepping over debris until he reached a room with a half-open door. Pushing it aside, he froze. Inside, a figure was sitting against the wall. She looked weak, covered in dust and bruises, but her eyes, those bright silver-blue eyes, opened when she heard his voice. She stared at him for a long moment, like she was seeing a ghost. "Ethan?" she whispered. He dropped his toolkit, his heart almost stopping. The sound of her voice broke 10 years of silence in an instant. "Lyra," he said quietly. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "You kept your promise," she whispered before closing her eyes from exhaustion. Ethan rushed to her side, checking her pulse. She was alive, just weak. He lifted her carefully in his arms, feeling how light she was. As he carried her back to his ship, he looked at her face. Older now, but still the same Lyra he remembered. The collar was gone. Her neck was free. He whispered softly, "You came back." The stars outside flickered through the window, as if the universe itself had waited for this moment. After all those years, she had returned. When Lyra opened her eyes, she saw soft white light above her. For a few seconds, she didn't know where she was. Her head hurt and her vision was blurry. Then she heard a familiar sound, the quiet hum of an old ship engine, one she somehow recognized from long ago. She turned her head slowly and saw Ethan sitting beside her. He was older now, his face sharper, his hair a little messy, but his eyes, those calm brown eyes, were the same ones she remembered from childhood. "You're safe," Ethan said gently, smiling when he saw her awake. "You were lucky. Your ship was close to breaking apart." Lyra blinked in surprise. You saved me?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, guess I still remember how to fix broken things." She smiled faintly at that, the same shy smile she used to have when she was a child. For a while, neither of them spoke. The hum of the engine filled the silence between them, warm and steady. "How long was I unconscious?" she asked quietly. "About a day," Ethan said. "You were dehydrated and low on oxygen. I had to restart your breathing system." Lyra nodded weakly. I thought I wouldn't make it." "You did," he said softly. "And I'm glad you did." She turned to him, studying his face. There was something about his calm tone that made her chest tighten. He wasn't that small boy anymore, but his eyes still carried the same kindness. After a while, Ethan brought her some warm broth and water. She tried to sit up but felt dizzy, so he helped her gently. "Easy," he said. "You've been through a lot." Lyra sipped slowly, her voice trembling. "You really never forgot me, did you?" Ethan looked away for a moment, his lips tightening into a small smile. "No," he said. "I looked for you, actually." "For years," her eyes widened. "You did?" He nodded. "When they took you away, I tried asking where you went. No one told me. When I got older, I joined the Galactic Survey Corps, thinking maybe I could find you someday." Lyra lowered her gaze, her hands trembling slightly. "I never thought I'd see you again." Ethan looked at her collarbone where the metal collar once rested. "You're free now," he said softly. "Aren't you?" Lyra hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, but it wasn't easy." She took a deep breath and began to tell her story. "When they took us away from New Asteron, I was sold with other Virelians to a mining station on planet Orsane. It was a harsh place. Many of us worked day and night with little rest. I tried to keep my promise to you alive in my heart, but time, it changes people, Ethan. There were days I thought I'd never be free. Ethan listened in silence, his jaw tightening as she spoke. One day, she continued, the mining station was attacked by raiders. They weren't after slaves, they wanted the mineral stores. During the chaos, I escaped with a few others. We stole a small ship and fled. For years after that, I worked where I could, hiding my past. Then the new peace law came and Virelians were declared free. But freedom isn't simple. Many of us have no home to return to. Her eyes grew moist. I started helping other freed workers. I joined a rescue group, the Virelian Reclaimers, to locate lost colonies. That's what I was doing when my transport was damaged near the asteroid field. Ethan leaned back, taking in every word. So that distress call? She nodded. Yes, I didn't expect anyone to come, honestly. Most people avoid this sector. When you opened that door, I thought I was dreaming. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe we both are. For a while, they sat in silence. Lyra stared out the ship's window at the slow swirl of distant stars. So much has changed, she whispered. Humans and Virelians used to fight. Now some work together, but there's still mistrust, Ethan nodded. Old wounds take time to heal. Lyra turned to him. And you? What happened to you after I left? He chuckled softly. Not much to tell. I worked, studied mechanics, and traveled. I guess I wanted to fix things wherever I went. Maybe it's because of you. Because of me? She asked, surprised. Ethan looked down at his hands. You were the first person I ever helped fix something with. I never forgot how happy you looked that day when the droid came to life. I guess that memory pushed me to keep helping others. Lyra smiled gently. You always had a kind heart. He met her eyes again, his voice low. I made a promise to you, remember? Her breath caught for a moment. That was a long time ago, she said quietly. Promises don't expire, Ethan replied. At least not for me. Lyra looked away, her eyes shining. Ethan, I'm not that same little girl anymore. I've seen things, terrible things. I've lost friends. I don't even know who I am sometimes, Ethan's voice softened. Then let's find out who you are now. Together. She looked at him, and for the first time since she woke up, she smiled fully, a real smile that reached her eyes. Over the next few days, Lyra slowly regained her strength. Ethan repaired her ship's main systems while she helped from the med bay. They worked like they used to, side by side. Sometimes they talked for hours about their lives. Other times they just sat in quiet comfort. One evening, as they floated near a glowing nebula, Ethan showed her the small droid they had repaired as children. It was old, scratched, and barely functional, but it still sat on his ship's console. Lyra gasped softly. You still have it? Ethan nodded. Couldn't throw it away. You built half of it, remember? She laughed softly, touching the droid's side. It's still alive. After all this time, just like us, he said gently. The droid blinked weakly, its single green light flickering. Lyra smiled and whispered something in her native language, a soft phrase that made Ethan curious. What did you say? He asked. It means, old things hold strong hearts. Ethan chuckled. I like that. Later that night, as Ethan sat in the cockpit watching the stars, Lyra joined him quietly. She stood beside him, her gaze lost in the endless space outside. Where will you go now? Ethan asked. Lyra hesitated. My group, the Reclaimers, they're waiting for me on a nearby moon. I was supposed to deliver supplies to them before the ship malfunctioned. I can take you there, Ethan said quickly. She turned to him. You'd do that? Of course. You saved my childhood, Lyra. Taking you to your team is the least I can do. Her eyes softened. You haven't changed, Ethan. Maybe a little taller, he joked. She laughed quietly, the sound filling the small cockpit. For a few moments it felt as if time had turned back, and they were just two children again, dreaming under the orange sky of New Asteron. But as the ship drew closer to the coordinates Lyra gave, something unexpected appeared on the radar, a large cruiser. Unmarked and approaching fast, Ethan frowned. That's not your team, is it? Lyra checked the monitor and froze. No, she whispered. Those are raiders. Before Ethan could react, the communication system beeped and a rough voice came through the speakers. Unknown vessel, power down your engines. You're trespassing in restricted space. Ethan quickly looked at Lyra. Why are they here? They must have tracked my distress signal, she said, fear flashing in her eyes. They want the data I was carrying. It contains the locations of freed colonies. Ethan's hands tightened on the controls. Then we're not giving it to them. Lyra looked at him with surprise. They'll destroy us. Maybe, he said calmly. But I made you a promise once, remember? I said I'd protect you. Lyra's heart pounded. That was when we were children. Promises don't expire, he said again with a small smile. Outside, the raider ships grew closer, their engines burning like red fire in the darkness. Lyra turned to him, fear and trust mixed in her eyes. Then we face them together, she whispered. Ethan nodded. Together. He reached for the controls and the ship's engines flared to life. The small vessel turned sharply toward the enemy, diving into the storm of stars and shadows. Somewhere deep inside, Lyra felt it. The same feeling she once had when they fixed the broken droid. Hope. The small ship shook as Ethan pulled it into a sharp turn. The warning lights flashed red, and the alarm echoed through the cockpit. Two large raider cruisers followed close behind, firing bursts of energy that lit up the dark space around them. Hold on, Ethan shouted. Lyra gripped the seat beside him as the ship spun between floating rocks from a broken asteroid field. Beams of blue light cut across their path, narrowly missing them. They're faster, Lyra said, her voice tense. Maybe, Ethan replied, his eyes locked on the radar. But they don't know these rocks like I do. He pushed a few buttons, and the ship dived sharply downward. The raiders fired again, but the shots hit only drifting debris. The old exploration vessel wasn't built for fighting, but Ethan had modified it over the years. He had added hidden boosters and a few clever tricks that most pirates didn't expect. The ship slid behind a massive asteroid, using it as cover. The scanner beeped softly as Ethan killed the main engines to hide their heat signal. Silence filled the cockpit. Lyra held her breath. Outside, the two raider ships slowed, scanning the area. Do you think they see us? She whispered. Ethan shook his head. Not yet, but they'll start sweeping soon. He checked the power readings. We can't stay hidden long. The engines will overheat if we don't move soon. Lyra turned toward him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Ethan, those ships, they don't just want me. They want what I'm carrying, he frowned. The colony data? She nodded. It's a full map of safe zones where freed Virelians are rebuilding their homes. If those raiders get it, they'll sell the information to whoever wants to capture them again. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then we can't let that happen. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small cube-shaped data crystal. It glowed faintly blue. This is what they're after. He looked at it and then back at her. If they want it, they'll chase us until they get it. So we give them something else. Lyra blinked. What do you mean? Ethan smiled slightly. A distraction. A few minutes later, he left the cockpit and hurried to the cargo bay. Lyra followed, still holding the data crystal. Ethan began digging through old parts and fuel containers. Help me find a spare power cell, he said. She found one and handed it to him. Ethan opened the casing and began connecting a few wires. This will act like a beacon, he explained. We'll load some fake data into it and make it look like the real thing. When they scan it, they'll think it's the crystal. Lyra watched him work, impressed. You always were good at fixing things. Sometimes fixing means tricking, he said with a small grin. After a few minutes, he finished. The fake beacon blinked blue, just like the real crystal. He placed it inside a small drone pod. When I launch this, it'll drift away from us, he said. They'll think we ejected the data to save ourselves. Once they chase it, we'll jump to light speed in the opposite direction. Lyra nodded. Let's do it. The raiders were still circling when Ethan restarted the engines. The instant they powered up, alarms began flashing again. They've locked on, Lyra shouted. Ethan didn't waste a second. Launching decoy. He pressed a button, and the drone pod shot out of the rear hatch, drifting slowly through space. Its signal glowed bright and clear, mimicking the energy pattern of the real data. On the radar, the two raider ships suddenly changed course. They sped toward the decoy, thinking they had found their prize. They took the bait, Ethan said with relief. Hold tight. He slammed a lever forward and the ship jumped into light speed. Stars stretched into white lines as they shot through space. For several minutes, everything was just a blur of motion and sound. Then, as the engines cooled, the stars returned to their usual calm sparkle. The raiders were gone. Lyra let out a long breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "We made it," Ethan smiled. "Told you. I've been running from trouble since I was 10. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You haven't changed. Neither have you," he said. "You still make me risk my life without warning." Lyra laughed again, but this time there was a hint of sadness in her smile. "Thank you, Ethan. You didn't have to do this." He looked at her, serious now. "Yes, I did. I promised I'd protect you, remember?" Her voice softened. "You really mean it, don't you?" "I always did." They flew for hours before reaching a small moon surrounded by blue mist. It was quiet, peaceful, and almost hidden from scanners. As they descended, Lyra pointed at a series of glowing domes on the surface. "There," she said with a smile. "That's one of our reclaimer bases." Ethan guided the ship down gently. The landing platform extended to receive them, and as the ship touched down, Lyra looked out the window with wonder. "This place," Ethan said quietly. "It's beautiful." "It's home," she replied softly. "For many who never had one." When the airlock opened, several Varelians rushed forward. They wore clean suits, their faces calm but alert. One of them, an older woman with crystal markings on her skin, stepped up to Lyra and embraced her. "Lyra, we thought we lost you." "I'm fine," Lyra said, smiling. "This is Ethan. He saved me." The older woman nodded gratefully. "You have our thanks, human." Ethan felt a little shy under their gaze. "Just glad she's safe." They guided Lyra to a medical area while Ethan stayed near the ship, watching the sky above. For the first time in days, everything felt still, but something in his chest felt heavy, like he knew their paths might separate again. Later, after she was checked and cleared by the doctors, Lyra found Ethan standing near the ship, staring at the horizon. The twin suns of the moon were setting, painting the sky orange and gold, just like the sunsets of New Asteron. "You're leaving, aren't you?" she asked quietly. Ethan turned to her, smiling faintly. "You've got your people now. You don't need me here." Lyra walked closer. "But I do," she said softly. "You're part of my story, Ethan. I wouldn't be here without you." He looked down at the ground. "You belong with them, Lyra. You have a mission, a purpose." She touched his arm gently. "And what about your purpose?" He hesitated. "I don't know anymore." Lyra smiled sadly. "Maybe your purpose isn't fixing machines anymore. Maybe it's fixing what's broken between our worlds." Ethan looked into her eyes, the silver light of the sunset reflecting in them. "You always did see more than I did." She stepped back slightly, holding out her hand. In her palm was the glowing blue data crystal. "Keep it," she said. He blinked. "Lyra, this belongs to your people." "It's just a copy," she said softly. "The real one is already safe. I want you to have this, to remember that even when things seem broken, hope still exists." Ethan slowly took it from her. The crystal was warm in his hand, glowing like a tiny heart. "Thank you," he said quietly. They stood together in silence as the last rays of sunlight faded. But just as peace settled over the moon, the base alarms began to blare. Red lights flashed across the landing zone. "What's happening?" Ethan asked. One of the guards ran past them. "The raiders! They found us. They must have tracked your ship's energy signature." Lyra's eyes widened. "They're coming here?" Ethan looked up at the sky. 3 large ships appeared through the clouds, their engines glowing red. He turned to Lyra. "Get everyone inside. I'll buy you some time." "Ethan, no." He shook his head firmly. "You said your people need that data. Then protect it. I'll handle the rest." Lyra stared at him, torn between fear and faith. She finally nodded. "Be careful," he smiled faintly. "Always." As she ran toward the shelter, Ethan climbed back into his ship. The engines roared to life once again. He took a deep breath and looked at the small droid on the console, the same one they had built as children. Its single green light flickered weakly. "Guess it's just us again, old friend," he murmured. Outside, the raider ships descended, firing bright streaks of energy. The ground shook as explosions lit up the night. Ethan's ship lifted off the pad, rising to meet them head-on. Lyra watched from below, her heart pounding as his ship streaked toward the sky like a silver comet. She whispered softly, "You promised, Ethan. Now come back to me." Ethan's ship sliced through the dark sky like a silver arrow. The raiders' ships flared red ahead, their engines roaring like angry beasts. Despite their size, they moved cautiously through the moon's atmosphere, firing sporadic energy blasts. Each shot lit the clouds above, turning night into day for a brief moment. Ethan's hands gripped the controls tightly. His heart raced, but his mind was calm. He had faced danger before, but this felt different. Lyra's life, the safety of her people, and the promise he made as a child. All depended on what he did next. He activated the ship's hidden boosters, and it surged forward, dodging an energy beam. Sparks flew from the hull as another shot grazed the side, leaving a streak of scorched metal. "Hang on," he muttered, leaning into the console. Below, Lyra watched from the base's observation deck. Her hands clenched the railing as the raiders advanced. Her people were hurrying inside the shelters, carrying the data crystals and moving vulnerable civilians to safety. She whispered a silent prayer for Ethan, for his courage, for the promise that had started this all. And then she saw it. The small droid sitting on Ethan's console, flickering its green light. Somehow it had survived all this time. Somehow it had survived him. She smiled faintly. He's not alone, she thought. Ethan's plan was simple but dangerous. He knew he could not outrun all three raider ships in the thick atmosphere. They were too fast and heavily armed. But if he could draw them away from the base, even for a few minutes, Lyra and her people would have a chance to escape. He flipped a switch and released a cluster of small decoy drones. They shot forward, emitting bright signals that mimicked his ship's energy signature. Two of the raider ships immediately veered toward the decoys. "That leaves one," Ethan muttered. The remaining ship roared toward him, firing a concentrated beam of energy. He rolled the ship sharply, the blast missing by mere meters. Sparks flew and the hull shuddered violently. He gritted his teeth. Not today. The raider ship closed in, trying to trap him between the surface of the moon and its firepower. Ethan dove through a narrow canyon, the cliffs on either side scraping the sides of his vessel. The raider fired again, but the ship's boosters pushed him through just in time. Ethan knew he couldn't keep this up forever. He needed a strategy that would end the fight quickly. His eyes darted across the console, scanning the terrain. There, a massive plateau jutted out over a deep ravine. If he could lure the raider over it, he could use the narrow space to his advantage. He twisted the controls, angling the ship toward the plateau. The raider followed, its massive form reflecting the fading light of the twin suns. At the base, Lyra's team had finished securing the civilians. "Ethan is doing everything he can," she told them. "Trust him. We've trained for moments like this." The older woman who led the reclaimers nodded. "We trust him, Lyra. You taught him well." Lyra smiled softly. She had always believed in Ethan. Even now, watching him face impossible odds, she felt that same calm reassurance she had as a child when they fixed that broken droid together. Ethan guided his ship over the plateau, weaving between jagged rocks. The raider followed closely, firing indiscriminately. He released another set of decoys, this time smaller and faster. The raider ship slowed, trying to destroy them, giving Ethan just enough space to maneuver. He glanced at the sensors. If he timed this correctly, he could push the raider toward a canyon and let gravity do the rest. He adjusted his trajectory and held his breath. The raider followed, unaware of the trap ahead. Ethan veered sharply at the last second, and the raider hurtled over the edge of the canyon. There was a flash of light as it collided with the rocky walls, and for a moment, the silence of space returned. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Got you," he whispered. Below, the base erupted in cheers as the remaining raiders withdrew. Lyra ran to the edge of the observation deck, tears in her eyes. "He did it," she whispered. He really did it. She felt a mix of relief and pride. The boy she had once promised to marry, the same boy who had stayed true to that promise through years of separation, had just saved countless lives. Ethan's ship descended gently onto the moon's landing pad. He climbed out, exhausted but smiling. Lyra ran toward him without thinking. "Ethan," she called. He turned, and for a moment neither spoke. They just looked at each other. Years of separation, pain, hope, and promises, all condensed into that single gaze. Then she ran the final few steps and threw herself into his arms. He held her tightly, careful not to hurt her with his strength. "You came back," he said softly. "I promised I would," she whispered. Burying her face in his shoulder, the reclaimers approached cautiously, giving them space. "We owe you more than we can say," the older woman said, looking at Ethan. He shrugged. I only did what was right. That's all. Lyra smiled up at him. It's more than that, Ethan. You kept a promise. You believed in me when nobody else did. Ethan looked down at her, his heart full. I never stopped believing. I told you that as a boy, and I meant it then. I mean it now, her eyes shimmered. Even after everything? Especially after everything, he said. The next few days were quiet. The moon became a place of recovery. Lyra reunited fully with her team, helping them plan and prepare for future rescues. Ethan stayed close, assisting with repairs and training, but also learning more about the Varelian people and their culture. At night, they would sit outside, watching the twin suns dip below the horizon. The sky turned shades of purple and gold, and for the first time in years, both of them felt peace. You know, Lyra said one evening, I used to think freedom was just being alive. But it's more than that. Freedom is being with people who care, people who trust you. Ethan smiled faintly. I think I understand that now. You don't lose people you truly care about, Lyra. Not even if the galaxy tries to take them away. She laughed softly. Even after 10 years? Especially after 10 years, he said. One evening, as the base settled into calm, Lyra turned to Ethan. Remember the promise we made as kids? He nodded. How could I forget? She stepped closer, holding his hand. We've both grown, we've both changed, but I still want that promise to come true. If you still want it, Ethan, will you marry me? Ethan's eyes softened and a smile spread across his face. Yes, Lyra. I promised you once, and I'll promise you again forever. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. Then we begin again, she whispered. The next weeks were filled with laughter and planning. The Reclaimers celebrated their small victory over the Raiders, and Ethan became part of their community. He learned their language fully, helped organize new rescue missions, and discovered that Lyra's strength and courage inspired everyone around her. Lyra and Ethan would often work together side by side, just like they had as children. Except now their bond was deeper, tempered by hardship, strengthened by trust and full of hope for the future. One evening, as the two of them watched the stars, Lyra leaned against Ethan's shoulder. Do you remember the droid we fixed as kids? She asked. Ethan chuckled softly. I'll never forget it. It's still here, she said, pointing to the small green light blinking on the console. Just like us. Ethan wrapped his arm around her. Then I guess we're both still alive, still fighting, still keeping promises. Lyra smiled up at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. And now, we'll face the future together. Ethan held her close. The galaxy stretched before them, vast, mysterious, and full of unknown dangers. But for the first time in his life, he knew that no matter what came, he would never face it alone. And in that moment, under the stars of a distant moon, a human boy and a Varelian girl, bound by a promise made long ago, finally found the life they had always dreamed of, together.